Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how I did my Nebula costume. I'm super excited. I already have a Nebula makeup tutorial posted, so check that out if you want. First, I start by sewing a mock-up with a cheap fabric, then drawing on all the details with a marker. Then I rip the mock-up open at the seams to create a new pattern. I spread it over paper and trace out the base shape. Then I cut out the pieces I drew on earlier and trace the details onto paper as well. I trace the base shape again so I have separate pieces. Then I cut out all the little detail pieces. Next, I trace the pieces onto fabric. And I begin sewing all the pieces together. I also use a pattern to mark extra details with chalk. Then I go over them with stitching to make them show up. This is what the details look like after some stitching. And I also do the same thing for other areas of the pants like the knee pads. I cut the pieces out I traced earlier onto fabric and sew them onto the base. Then I sew all the pieces together as you can see here. After I finish making both sides of the legs, I lay them on top of each other inside out. And I pin them together in the front and in the back. Then I sew over the pinned areas. After I sew the front and back, I open up the pants and sew the legs together next. I do the same exact thing for the shirt. I make a mock-up, trace on the details, cut it out, and make new pattern pieces. Then I sew all the pieces together. I also added a zipper in the back. I begin pinning and sewing on all the rest of the details. And this is how it looks. I also make hip guards and belts. I just trace out basic shapes and cut them and sew down the edges. And I sew it to a strip of fabric and add some Velcro so it's easy to put on. And this is what it looks like all sewn together. As you can see, the colors are way off. When I made this costume, I was under a very tight time constraint and only had a few days to make it. I had already been looking for fabric for months prior with no luck, so I decided to just go with some scrap leftover fabric that I already had lying around in my workroom. I didn't care which color it was because I decided to just paint it anyway. I did try to keep it something that would be a similar shade though. As usual, my adorable little fur babies want attention whenever I'm trying to be productive. Next, I'm going to show you how I made the metal arm. I made the base using TreeFlx that I heated up and formed to my shoulder and upper arm. I will add a link to TreeFlx in the description. Then I wrapped poster board around the TreeFlx and glued it down so it would hold to my arm. Here's what it looks like when I finish the upper arm base. And I also made a little tube with poster board for the lower arm as well. Then I sewed a sleeve of stretchy fabric and slid it over my arm. And I glued the poster board base to the fabric so it wouldn't move around and I could build over it. Next, what I did was cover the arm in craft foam. I used spray glue to glue the craft foam to the fabric. I also used some hot glue when gluing the craft foam down for extra hold. Take your time with this because you want it to be applied as smooth as possible. And I cut off any excess craft foam. And don't worry about the areas near the elbow because that will be covered anyway. So you can cut the craft foam away so it's easier to bend. I also cut slits in the top of the craft foam so it would form around my shoulder, and then I glued it down. I also did the same thing for the lower arm. Here you can see both pieces glued on. There's a gap at the elbow area so it's easy to bend, but it still holds together thanks to the fabric. Now this part I was worried about, but it actually ended up being super easy. I looked at lots of reference photos of Nebula's arm to try to recreate the lines by tracing them out with a pen. I also used that pen to make indentations by pressing firmly into the foam while tracing back and forth. Next, I'm gonna make the headpiece. I actually already have a pattern for this on my website that you can download and print at home on your own printer for only a few dollars. I just trace the pattern onto craft foam and poster board and then glue the pieces together. I add a little tab of poster board under the middle line so it has some extra hold. It's meant to bend so you can form it to your head. This eyepiece took me so long to trace out and make sure it was the right shape and size for a face. I also studied all the details for hours. And this is included in the same pattern as the headpiece that you can download on my website and print at home on your computer on regular paper. Hopefully it will save you a lot of time and you can get right to doing a cool makeup test for Nebula. I cut the pattern out and traced it onto craft foam. And I glue a thin stretchy fabric to the back of the craft foam so it won't rip apart when you apply it and remove it from your face, so you're able to use it over and over. I also curve the foam slightly with a heat gun and stretch it over a curved object. Then I use my pattern to trace out all the details onto the eyepiece. And just like with the arm, I use the pen to make indentations by pressing it down while tracing it. I also make this little eyebrow shape to make a raised area above the eye. I fold it and apply a strip of hot glue in the middle, pinching it where the glue is applied to make a pointed edge. Then I just glued it down. Next, I coat all of the foam pieces I made in a few layers of Mod Podge to seal them before painting. Then I add some thin coats of silver spray paint. Once the silver spray paint is dry, I use a small paintbrush dipped in black acrylic paint and fill in all the indentations. This helps add more dimension and just makes it look more realistic. I fill in the crevices, then wipe away any excess with my fingers or a napkin. Although this isn't totally necessary, I highly recommend it because it makes a huge difference and makes the foam look way more like metal. And I do the same thing for the eyepiece. After I fill in all the indentations with black paint, I go over all the raised edges with a silver paint marker. A silver Sharpie would also work. I just go over all the edges to highlight them and make them look sharper. It really makes it look more like metal and makes the details really pop. Now to fix the color of the pants. Like I explained before, I had no luck finding good fabric and then had a tight deadline, so I had to work with whatever I had. I only had this gray fabric, so I used it and now I'm going to paint it purple. I mix red and purple paints together till I get the desired color that I want. Then I add a little bit of water to the paint and brush it directly onto the fabric. This fabric doesn't have stretch to it, so I don't have to worry about it being painted. But if you are working with a stretched fabric, make sure you put it on a mannequin or wear it while you paint it so it is already stretched out. Or else it will lose its stretch and you may not be able to fit in it anymore. If that happens, try scrubbing your clothing with warm water and dish soap and get as much paint off as possible to try to get the stretch back. And then paint it again while it's stretched out. I also paint the shirt and any other pieces that need to be painted. For her blue arm, instead of using makeup every time I wore it, I decided to make a sleeve. I just used a stretchy white fabric and painted it blue with acrylic paint. Then, once the paint dried, I used a black pin to fill in the lines that she has on her skin. As you can tell, I'm putting a tool as basic as an everyday pin to good use for this costume. To make her hands, I painted these white gloves blue and glued on some cheap black fingernails to them. Then I glued and folded a strip of craft foam, then painted it silver and cut little tubes and glued it to the outfit to add detailing. Again, I used more TreeFlx and heat it up with a heat gun, then form it over the mannequin neck. When I was done, I had a shape like this. Then I coated it in a lot of layers of black Plasti-Dip. Here you can see the neck piece painted. Due to the time crunch, I did not have a lot of time to put into boot covers, so I just made them out of foam very quickly and easily. But if you have some extra time, I would recommend covering the foam in fake leather or vinyl so it lasts longer and looks more authentic. All I did was cut some basic shapes out of foam and glued strips over them and Velcro in the back. There were a whole bunch of other details like these wrist guards that were made in a similar way to the rest of the costume. They're just some pieces of craft foam glued over poster board with a strip of vinyl over it that Velcros at the wrist. The elbow pads were made of a vinyl base shape with a strip of elastic sewn around it, then little oval pieces of craft foam glued over it. These were little sleeves that go under the elbow pads. And also some fingerless gloves for both arms. All these pieces were just sewn tubes of fabric, some with holes cut in them. And this is the before and after of everything being painted. And that's pretty much it for the costume. I really hope this tutorial can help you get a better idea of how you want to make your Nebula costume. Or maybe you learned some things that you can apply to a different project. I had so much fun being Nebula. She's one of my favorite characters from Guardians of the Galaxy and Avengers. This was a really big project and I finished it in only 3 days, so I guess if there's a will, there's a way. I also had a lot of fun being super thrifty with this and using leftover and scrap material that I already had and turning it into something I never thought it could be. The most expensive thing about this costume were the contacts and bald cap, which weren't even that costly. So it just goes to show that you can make some really cool things on a really tight budget. I have a full makeup tutorial for this look on my channel and plenty of other makeup and costume tutorials as well. I will also add all the helpful links in the description, so be sure to check that out. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Bye!